Yes, my parents were born within about 4 or 5 miles from one another. My father's family had homesteaded along with a number of his brothers and sisters in this wilderness area south of Squim Bay. And my mother's family had taken a homestead also, and they had looked at a map. They didn't go. They looked at a map and found this great place where two rivers came together, and they thought that would be a splendid place for a ranch. Mm-hmm. Well, it ended up it was in a canyon.
Was this in Washington State?
Yeah, this is in Washington State. And the families knew one another because they were, they were within a few miles of one another. Mm-hmm. In fact, when my mother was born, my husband's father, Hilda, or her mother, Hilda, was there for the birth.
In Washington?
In Washington, out in the wilderness in Washington. And my mother's family did not last very long there.
What was their last name?
Their last name was Hokanson.
Okay.
And after floods one year and bad snowstorms another year, the Forest Service decided they wanted to buy back that homestead. And they did that. And so they got money and used the money to buy a large chunk of land in Tacoma. But they kept in touch, the two families. My grandfather, Hokanson, would come up there hunting. My grandmother, Hilda's family, they did a little bit of small farming, but mostly they survived by hunting and gathering.
Were they from Sweden? Were they the ones
they
that
were
were they
Sweden.
the immigrants from Sweden?
Both families had come from Sweden.
And what part of Sweden?
Värmland and Småland, the two.
Uh-huh.
They actually, the families, the ones in Småland, were fairly close together when we had visited there. But the families kept in touch. And when my mother graduated from high school, she was the middle daughter. She had 2 older sisters and 1 younger sister, and then a couple of younger brothers. And she was aware of the fact that families tended to keep one daughter unmarried and at home to take care of families in their old age. And she didn't want to be that person. And when she graduated from high school, she took a teacher's exam. And she passed it. And she, from that, got a lifetime teacher's license.
Wow.
And she did go to the college there, College of Puget Sound, for a couple of months, and then took a job teaching way out on the close to the Pacific Ocean, out by Forks, and she had a wonderful story of how she got there, got to Port Angeles by boat, and then took a bus or something up to Lake Crescent, and took a boat across Lake Crescent from one end to the other, where they met her with a horse and buggy, and went off to Forks and
Oh my goodness.
and the next little river down, and got into a dugout canoe and went down to the place she was going to teach.
My goodness.
Way, way out there. And she got in there. And, she'd been raised in a pretty nice house in Tacoma. Still there. But she was here, and she had her little room where she had a mattress that was kind of set up on blocks of wood and an orange crate nailed to the wall to put her stuff in. Anyway, she taught there. It was just 3 months that they had school. And she did that and then went back and did another year, I think, at the College of Puget Sound. And then the next job she got was teaching up in the area where she was born and where Hilda lived. And it was their school, and actually she lived with Hilda's family. They always boarded the school teacher.
That's Hugo's family.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's my mother's family.
Oh, Hilda is your mother, was from your mother's
Well,
family.
Yeah, and Hilda was, we have Hilda.
It's your mother's family and your father's family. I skipped a generation there.
They're both there. But my no, this is my father's family, Hilda. My mother's family had moved to Tacoma.
Yes.
Yeah, that was the way that went.
So Hilda was an Eck, or at least in the Eck family.
She was a Fritz.
A Fritz, but part of the Eck.
No, the Ecks that didn't come into it until I married an Eck.
Hilda, Fritz, and Mr. Eck are Hugo's parents. Hilda was present at Dorothy's mother's birth.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to connect that up. Thank you.
But Hilda was my father's mother.
Now, what your mother was teaching? What was your father doing?
Well, my father grew up in this wild area, and probably I think he just went to school through the 8th grade. That's all that they had, and then he would work now and then at carpentry work. He had some friend, and they would do carpentry work, build houses and things. They had one very interesting project he tells about, and that is when the state or the feds came up with regulations that you could not have a cream separator in the barn. It had to be in a separate building. So they had jobs all over that area. They probably did a dozen or so nice little milk houses that were maybe 6 or 8 feet square, big enough for that to go in. But they had done other houses, and one of the spectacular ones he always bragged about was down in Blinn, and Blinn was a little community, really the closest real community to where they were. And there was a store there, and a service station, and various things. There was even a church. But they took a contract to build a house for somebody there, and they decided they were going to build that house in 24 hours.
Oh my goodness.
Of course, you realize that houses that time didn't have electricity or plumbing or things like this. So they got all the materials together, and they started just after midnight, I guess, and they built the house and they finished it in their 24 hours.
Wow. Wow.
Roofing and all?
Yeah, yeah.
Now, what was your father's last name, your maiden name?
Fritz.
Oh, I see.
He
So
was
Fritz
Ira Fritz.
Okay.
My grandmother was Hilda Fritz.
Okay.
And come the World War, First World War, my father was drafted. He always said that. He didn't just join up. He was drafted. He had 5 sisters. And so he was the only male there really to help run things. Except the women really ran them.
Yes.
Of course.
Of course.
So he went off, and we have a good collection. We call it Letters from France, and they're the letters that he wrote home and also letters that people from home wrote to him. And by that time he had a romance going with my mother, who was in Tacoma. And so letters to her also.
From World War I.
Mm-hmm.
My goodness.
And
You still have those?
I have them, and we're talking about doing something, I don't know what with them. But they're interesting. grandmother had letters and also talked with people who were in the trenches with him over there.
Wow.
And they said he was marvelous in the trenches because he knew the words to every popular song or any song.
He could keep their spirit up.
And he had a good voice, and he sang, and it was important to them.
Yes.
Then when things really got bad and they went, I mean, a lot of the time they were just there in the trenches, and the things that bothered them most were the cooties. But then when they finally did go off and out of the trenches, and it was wild warfare there,
Yes.
and he was hit in the head with some shrapnel, so he was bleeding profusely, and they took him back to kind of a first aid station that was in some old railroad car, and got him patched up. And he had his leggings on, and they had these leggings that wrapped around their legs, and they were all wet, and they took them off and found that he had been walking through mustard gas, and the skin had come off his legs.
Gosh.
So he was sent back to a hospital, and that's where he stayed for the rest of the war. He finally had, the legs were pretty well healed up, and he was ready to go back and join his troop, but he had some dental work that needed to be done, and they got in and found shrapnel in his cheek.
Oh my gosh.
And so they had to take that out, and by the time they did that, the war was over.
Wow.
He has a great story on Armistice Day, and he was still in his pajamas and wasn't allowed to leave.
In the hospital?
Yeah. Felt perfectly good, and he knew there was all this celebration going on, and he wanted to be a part of it. And there was an officer in the same unit he was in the hospital, and he said, you know, you can roll up your pants and put on my boots, and only officers have leather boots. And then I think he lent him his coat too, and so he could walk right out without going through it.
He just
Yeah,
joined the crowd.
yeah, and they had a wonderful celebration, and he said he was lucky that he was as tall as he was, because he could decide which of these lovely ladies that wanted to kiss everybody.
He had his pick.
He had his pick, kind of.